What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel, and it's time to give you another game preview / game prediction for the 2023 college football season, and it will be Week 3's matchup between the Tennessee Volunteers and the Florida Gators. Big-time game coming up here this weekend for Week number 3 of the college football season. It's always a big-time game when these two teams step out on the field in the SEC East. Tennessee and Florida have a lot of history with one another. This series is pretty close. Florida's kind of dominated the series as of late, but Tennessee beat them last year 38-33. You look at the 90s, Tennessee and Florida, Florida kind of dominated those years in the 90s. 2000s, it was all Florida in that year. Then 2010s, Tennessee only had one win in the 2010s, and that was 2016, where they finally ended that 11-game losing streak. And then 2020 so far, Florida won in 2020. Then a couple years ago, 38-14 at home, and then last year Tennessee took home their first win. So this is always a competitive game. I think this is probably the biggest game of the weekend. I know there are a lot of other options out there where I had some game preview / game predictions. There's North Carolina, Minnesota. But I don't think anything can beat out this rivalry. Tennessee and Florida, I wanted to go ahead and do a rivalry in the SEC. So we're going to give you a game preview / game prediction on this game. We're going to go through the stats for both of these teams. And then we're going to give you the game summary of what the game summary looks like. We're going to give you who the favorite going into this game is, and also check out the time for the game and what channel it's going to be on. And then we'll also give you keys to the game here for both of these teams of how they can win the game this weekend. And then we'll of course give you a prediction at the end of this video. We're going to see how the game will go down this Saturday. But let's get right into it here with Tennessee versus Florida in week number 3, game preview / game prediction here. And we'll start with the stats for both of these teams. Tennessee comes into this game with a record of 2-0. They're coming off a couple of wins to start out the year. Virginia beat them on 49-10 in that first game of the season. Then they beat Austin Peay this past weekend. That was, or actually I should say just last night. But Tennessee was not really good in that game. They were a little bit sluggish in that game. They only scored 30 points in that game. They won 30-13 in that game. But Tennessee is still overall pretty explosive on offense. They're averaging 39.5 points per game, 477.5 yards per total yards per game this year. So yeah, you can tell that offense is very explosive in the first 2 games of the year. Passing yards, 220 yards per passing. The passing yards are a little bit lower to start out the year. Joe Milton, we don't really see him throw that deep ball that much just yet. I mean, he's only connected 1 deep ball so far this season. Rushing yards, they're really good at rushing the football. Tennessee's got 257.5 yards per rushing this year. They got some great tailbacks with Jabari Small, Jalen Wright, and then, of course, Dylan Sampson. So this running back, this triple running back guys are really loaded on the Tennessee offensive side of the football. You look at offensively, and the rankings are 25th on offense in the country, and then defensively 29th. So both offenses and defensively, they're both pretty even. But again, just a difference there with the rankings. So Tennessee, there's their stats. Again, they're coming into this game with a record of 2-0. Florida comes into this game with a record of 1-1. They're averaging 30 points per game this year. They average about 453 yards of total yards per game this year as well. So that offense seems to be getting better for Florida. I know it's just about a couple weeks in. They weren't really good against Utah in that first game, but they're coming in with a record of 1-1. I forgot to mention that they redeemed themselves after Utah, losing them in week 1. That's who they lost to on that Thursday night game on August 31st, and then they redeemed themselves from last week. Passing yards, those seem to be going up just a little bit. Graham Mertz, 283 yards per passing. Transfer from Wisconsin is going to have a big game here this weekend. But Florida's weakness right now is definitely the running game. They haven't really ran the football that well. They got some great tailbacks, but they just can't seem to run the football that well. They're only averaging about 170 yards on the ground. And then you look at their offensively in the rankings. This offense still is kind of, getting a little bit better. They're 40th in the country, but their defensive rankings looking really good. 3rd in the country. They're good at stopping the run. And I don't think Florida's going to be in the top 5 very long for their defense, because this will be their toughest game of the weekend when they go up against that hurry-up tempo offense. But those are the stat comparisons between these two teams. Again, total yards per, yards this year, those look pretty even. And the passing yards, there's a big, advantage there for Graham Mertz. But the running game definitely goes to Tennessee. And then the rankings definitely have an advantage on the offense for Tennessee. But defensively, it's Florida. So those are the stat comparisons between these two teams. Let's now go to the game summary. And again, this game will be at 7 o'clock Eastern Time this Saturday on ESPN. Of course, it's an ESPN game. It's always a big-time game between these two teams. The game's in Gainesville, Florida, so home field advantage going into this game for Florida. But Tennessee's favored by 7 points, and the over-and-under is at 57.5. So they're kind of thinking that this will be a low-scoring type game as of right now. I think it's going to be a little bit of a high-scoring game. I think based off of what I saw from the first 2 weeks of the college football season, I know Florida hasn't looked great in the first couple weeks. I know they redeemed themselves. I mean, they scored 49 in their last game, but against Utah, they were very sluggish. In Tennessee, I know they were sluggish against Austin Peay. But when it comes to these two teams in the SEC, I think we're going to see a very high-scoring game and a back-and-forth type game here coming up this weekend. And again, Tennessee, even though they're heading on the road this weekend, they're a touchdown favorite going into this game. Maybe because Florida is not even ranked and Tennessee is just overall the better talented roster. But again, Florida is a team that you don't want to sleep on in this game. Florida's going to really come out here fighting in this game, and they're going to definitely have to pressure Joe Milton in this game. But again, Tennessee's favored in this game by a touchdown. They're heading on the road at the Swamp. They haven't won at the Swamp for a very long time. And then the over and under is at 57.5. I just don't really like that number. I think I wish it could be at 60-something, because I think this is going to be a really high-scoring game. So, again, the game's at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Tennessee ranked number 11 in the AP poll. They dropped 2 spots down after that game against Austin Peay. And again, this game will be on ESPN this Saturday at 7 o'clock. Let's now go to the keys to the game here for both of these teams. For Tennessee, it's make explosive plays on the offensive side of the football. The offense was very sluggish against Austin Peay, but maybe they were not focused going into that game against Austin Peay. Maybe they were focused going into this game against Florida, and I think they should really make explosive plays in this game against Florida. Joe Milton also has to stay consistent. That's my number 2 key for Tennessee. Joe Milton missed a lot of, great throws this past, just last night. And, his receivers, I don't think it was Joe Milton's fault. I think the receivers, just made some big-time drops. There were times where Tennessee had an explosive play, and they left him wide open. Austin Peay's defense left him wide open and everything. And that just kind of, led to drops and everything. So Joe Milton has to stay consistent, because he is heading on the road for the first time, and then secondary has to step up. That's been kind of the biggest weakness for Tennessee in the last couple years with Josh Heupel. In the first, 2 years, the secondary has been a big problem for them. But I think the secondary is a little bit better this year. But again, they were not really good against Austin Peay this past weekend. So we're going to have to see this secondary really step up for Tennessee. And then for Florida, the keys to the game here for them to win the game, they have to force turnovers, definitely on this offense of Tennessee. They also have to protect Graham Mertz on the offensive side of the football. Remember in that game against Utah, he was sacked a couple, actually like 7 times, and he was pressured a lot in that game. So, yeah, the offensive line has to do their work, because Tennessee, they like to be aggressive on the defensive side of the football. And this is also a great pass rushing, Tennessee defense. And they also have to stop the run game of Tennessee. Tennessee has a great run game, like I mentioned in the stat comparisons. They're averaging 257 yards on the ground. I mean, they're probably the best running team right now in the SEC. I mean, like I said, they got Dylan Sampson, they got Jabari Small, Jalen Wright. Those guys have played college football for a very long time. While Dylan Sampson only has, in his second year, but Jalen Wright and Jabari Small have been there for Tennessee for a very long time. So, again, these are the keys to the game here for both of these teams. Tennessee, they have to make explosive plays on the offense. Joe Milton has to stay consistent. And then the secondary has to step up for Tennessee. And then also for Florida, they have to force turnovers on this Tennessee offense. Protect Graham Mertz on the offensive line. Give him time to throw the football. And then stop the run game in order for Tennessee to not get those big-time runs with their running backs. And those running backs can make some catches as well. So make sure to, guard them if you're Florida, to really protect, obviously the running game and everything. So Florida, they have to stop the run game. Again, they have to stop these running backs for Tennessee. Let's now go to the prediction here for both of these teams. So Tennessee versus Florida. Again, this is a matchup that's always really, a competitive game every single year in the SEC East. And again, Tennessee hasn't won at the Swamp in so many years. Could this finally be the year that Tennessee finally wins in the Swamp? Florida's a little bit down this year, but Florida's going to come out and playing. They're going to come out and play in this game, and they're going to give Tennessee a little bit of problems. I think Florida's defense is really good enough to hang in there with Tennessee's offense. I think it's going to be a back-and-forth game like it was last year. Tennessee took control in the second half of that game last year. And, in the preseason, I did pick Florida to win this game, but when I look back on it now, I just don't really think Florida has a good opportunity. I know they were kind of sluggish against Utah, but, in that game, it just kind of told me that Florida is not going to be a very competitive team. I think they will be competitive in this game, but I think Tennessee overall, they just have the better roster, and obviously the offense I think is going to what's going to get to Florida's head. Tennessee is going to go really hurry up offense all night long in this game. I know it's a very tough place to play in the Swamp, but I think finally Tennessee wins in the Swamp, and I'm changing my pick. I'm going to pick Tennessee to win this game 38-31. And like I said, I think this will be a back-and-forth game. And I think Tennessee covers that spread. They win by 7 points, and they win at 38-31. So, again, this game goes back and forth. I think a turnover probably changes the game. Maybe Tennessee forces that turnover. Maybe Graham Mertz gets sacked too many times in this game, and Tennessee just continues to pressure, the offensive line for Florida. But again, anything can happen in this game. It's a rival game. You never know what can happen. But, this is a very important game for, both of these teams. It kind of decides who is the second best team in the SEC East. I know South Carolina's in that conversation. Missouri's also in there. But again, I just don't think South Carolina and Missouri and Kentucky are on Tennessee's level yet. I don't think anybody's on Georgia's level just yet, but Tennessee, they are desperate for this win. And I think they were not focused going into the game against Austin Peay. They were focused on this game against Florida. And I think that's kind of that kind of helps them this year. I think it kind of helps them going into this game. I think they're more focused on Florida this weekend, and they get this victory, and I think that's what helps them out. So Tennessee, I'm changing my pick from the preseason. Again, I predicted Florida to win this matchup earlier in the year, but now I'm picking Tennessee to win it here this weekend. So Tennessee, again, my prediction is to, win 38-31. And again, I think a turnover really changes the game, or maybe a final touchdown changes the game as well. And I think Tennessee comes out on top with a victory in the Swamp. So Tennessee is my prediction to win this game. Give me your thoughts on this game. Who do you think will win this one, Tennessee or Florida? And also give me your score prediction down in the comments below. And stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports Channel.